the incentives in the system is to slowly beat all the innovation and all of the risk taking out of them. Because if you are assigned you're assigned a contract action and you want to do something innovative and new, you have to have top level cover. You got to have like some, political appointee or somebody who wants to do something disruptive that says, I want you to take risks.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Optimized Podcast. I am your host, Jeff Shapiro. Folks, I have yet another awesome guest for everyone today. I'm very excited to talk with the one and only Chris Hamm. Chris currently is the CEO of Fin Acquisitions. He recently retired from the GSA a few months ago after a 25-year career, a career Govie. His last role was the SES, responsible for all work within the Defense Department in GSA, FAS, AAS. You can explain to us some of these acronyms a little bit later, the Assisted Acquisition Service. Before that, Chris was Mr. FedSim. Apparently, he was given a sash and a crown, serving as director for about a decade. And he also had a side job as GSA's first acquisition innovation advocate. Chris is joining us from sunny Marco Island, Florida. I have been there, by the way, where his wife and two teenagers have a year-round tan. So welcome, Chris. So glad you can make it.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on the podcast. Your first podcast post-retirement.
Oh, look at that. Wow, I have that honor. I'm going to have to add that to my accolades on my LinkedIn profile. So I like to start things off a little lighthearted. I mean, we have a lot of great ground to cover. There's only been a couple of changes that have happened over the last few months within the government. But first, before we get there, I just want to hear your story about how you entered the government. Why did you go straight away, go working for the government? What were you looking for?
When I was in grad school, printed out on the wall, there was a job board. And in 1999, the Presidential Management Internship was a postcard you mailed in. So I ripped off the postcard and mailed it and somehow got to a selection phase to become, a presidential management intern, later called a fellow. And we went to a job fair working for the federal government. And that job fair, they had FBI, the State Department, it's like there's all these cool jobs. So I'm confident, I was going to go change the world. And I actually took the GSA section and I ripped it out of my little pamphlet because I'm never going to work at GSA. Whatever. I don't know what they do. And I talked to a person at the job fair, and they had told me that GSA was actually the largest secret buyer of everything, the most number of cars. And, if you ever wanted to do large computer work, that's where it happened. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. So I went to an interview. I had a web development background. I knew how to do websites for city and state government. And they asked me if I wanted to run the creation of the AmeriCorps website. New program, for the administration. And, I'm 23 years old. I'm like, I can run a website for the government. This would be incredible. So I took the job. And here's how I got into acquisition. I asked when on the second or third day, could I get, could I get a server, some software that I use so I could start working on the project? And they were like, you're not going to spend, the $4,000 you think you're going to spend. The budget for this is $100,000, and you've got to write an acquisition plan, and then you've got to compete it so that companies will bid on it, and then you'll help manage it. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, wait, I'm not going to build the website. I'm going to hire the company to run the website. So then I quickly turned and said, if this is how things work, I'm going to have to go to all of these, contracting classes. I'm going to learn the language, speak fluently in FAR and RFQ versus RFP. So I shifted really quickly in the 2 years from techie to now full-on government acquisition person.
Yeah. So did you end up becoming a full 1102 contracting officer, or did you somehow go around the back door and become such a acquisition?
Actually avoided it. I have taken all of the classes to get a FACSI certification, but I also was a project manager. So I did the PMP and then the fax COR. So I was doing all of the different certs. Never actually signed a contract, which is really ironic because at
Wow.
the end of my career, I was like the designated head of contracting activity for some work. And the 1102s was like, we just couldn't believe that somebody finally gave me the pen to sign off on some of the things after, like, you know, who I was 25 years ago. So I speak it. I ran an acquisition organization, but I actually never did sign myself.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, there you go, folks. If you want to excel in acquisitions, you do not have to start as an 1102, but I'm sure, you know, learning a lot of the same classes that they've gone through to get what the WIA type certifications or the other stuff that's out there, there's certainly a lot of opportunity to grow and to really flourish within the federal procurement community. So speaking of federal procurement, let's talk about the March 20th executive order. Was called Eliminating Waste and Saving Taxpayer Dollars by Consolidating Procurement. It aims to increase GSA's role in the acquisition of common goods and services. It also designates the GSA administrator to be the executive agent for all government-wide acquisition contracts for information technology. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure even when you first started 25 years ago at GSA, I mean, GSA has always been that sort of centralized hub, you know. So how has this consolidation gone thus far from what you've seen when you were there and what you're seeing? I'm assuming you still have a couple of friends still there. So how are you seeing this consolidation?
So first thing is going to be there are small agencies that are consolidating into GSA, and there was, you know, examples of that in the last 2 months. The second part is really around the common goods and services and the categories. And the third part is around the executive agent status of GWACs moving to GSA. So the first part, you know, I've been out for 2 months, but we measure months in dog years now in the time of this administration. So like what I know is, you know, very, very dated. I can tell you like structurally how difficult it is. So OPM and possibly some other, you know, smaller agencies are going to be folded in, and then the centralized, you know, procurement for just those inside of GSA. Every single one has a different system and often a different appropriation. And I can tell you one thing is a universal truth in the history of contracting. There has never been a contracting officer that likes another contracting officer's work. They don't want to pick up a decision that somebody else has made and then administer it because, like, if you had done it, you would have done it somewhat differently, or the files are in a different format or something. So the very start of this, taking OPM contracts, merging them into GSA, incredibly difficult. Like, how do you just move the number of awards from system A to system B and then have somebody who knows anything about them to go figure out, I need to do an extension, I need to award something. So there's just a logistics, like a throughput challenge for operating this small consolidation. So the original idea was they're going to, in quick succession, moves agency by agency and consolidate into GSA. And then the reality of where's the money? What's the system? Which system we're going to use between all of them combined? It is going to go slower than what the initial goal was. Logically, it makes total sense. You would want to have, if you're going to do contracting for your email system, just have one. Like, why would you have 4 contracts? But you've got to consolidate those. You got to write a consolidation analysis to do it. So just like logistically, the plan is sound, but the timetable is probably extended. All right. So the second part is now the common goods and services. Category management isn't new. It has been out there, and the GSA Federal Acquisition Service was previously organized by category. So there is a group that manages professional services and human capital. There's a separate group that manages information technology. There's the fleet program. So there are current experts that are inside of GSA for a number of these categories. And then there are the other ones that were assigned to different federal agencies. The main change is moving from GSA being the market maker, they'll award a series of GSA schedules, and then everybody will have to go buy from those schedules. This is the way it's worked for, in the last 3 decades. suddenly GSA is going to have more influence into who's the actual winner, and then which vehicle are you going to use in order to order off those categories. So it used to be like the schedule would be a mile wide. Everybody's on it. If you're going to consolidate and actually try and drive efficiency, you're probably doing a blanket purchase agreement against a schedule with a limited number of awardees. And then you're more in the picking of winners. Like you're doing requirements and you're doing source selection for specific agencies. At the very start, the agencies themselves are always going to be the experts in what they actually need. GSA will not be that, particularly for the categories that they didn't previously own. But for professional services and for IT, you're already starting to see some quick movement. Like there was the negotiating directly with OEMs. So GSA announced like significant discounts off the GSA schedule for Adobe. This will probably play later, so back in April. And there'll probably be more that are rolling out, which are, significant savings. So areas where GSA has expertise, you'll see quick movement. Areas where you're interfacing with another agency, then it'll be more interfacing with those agencies on the decisions on how you're going to negotiate significant discounts for efficiencies.
Yeah. So before you get into the third category, understanding how those agencies' individual needs, whether it's cybersecurity infrastructure at that agency, whether it's the physical infrastructure, certain agencies have locations out in rural areas, others have locations in urban areas. And when you're buying certain goods and services, getting that certain customization, it's challenging, and you needing to understand, the actual agency's mission and what they need and how they can use those goods and services. I guess in some cases, some of the acquisition officials are coming from those agencies if they're not already cut. But I'm assuming most of those GSA acquisition officers will be GSA employees. I mean, I've seen the job advertisements out at all levels, so they're looking to bring in those who may have been riffed or otherwise, retired early or whatever it may be, bringing them back. Isn't that going to be somewhat of a challenge, and how they can get over that? I mean, when they, I would think, back in 2000 when you first started, teleconferencing was literally over a phone. Now here we are where we can share screens, share files, much more faster, much more real time. I think that'll aid in that, but love to hear more of your perspective, how understanding that down the line customer to be done by a centralized procurement activity.
I've had either the fortune or the misfortune of trying to do government-wide acquisitions a couple of times. I did some work for OMB in the 2000s, and then 2010s, the CDM program, the DHS Continuous Diagnostic Mitigation Program. So that was, let's buy endpoint sensors for every civilian agency. Let's try and get, increase our cybersecurity posture, where we would group the different agencies into buckets that were like similar infrastructure. And we would go ask them, how many users do you have? How many endpoints do you have? I'm sure everybody's got some network monitoring. Tell us how many you have. That discovery process took several months, and we were frequently off by an order of magnitude. So it's really hard to contract when you think you're buying 50,000 and you end up buying 500,000. You're negotiating your deals are harder. So take that, put it in the current environment where resourcing is absolutely challenged. Significant number of reductions of staff in different locations. There are great tools you can use now. I'm sure you can use artificial intelligence. You can use more network monitoring tools that we had then, but you will be wrong. Like the government will try and do something, and we'll discover that the consolidated buy that we're trying to do, we've actually already paid for half the licenses because they were bundled in something else and they expire on different times. And so, the idea of consolidated buying is sound, but then you will make an error. And then you have to have some contract instrument that you can evolve over time so that you can fix the underlying problems. And, and somebody who's not at headquarters, somebody who's off at the, they're They're working for USDA. They're out in a rural location. Like, they're not checking their email every day at their desk. All of a sudden, something's going to stop working. They're going to raise their hand, and then somebody's got to go fix it. So in the end, if you do it, the second round will be more efficient, but the very start of it is going to be very challenging to get those requirements into a real procurement.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is we should expect a lot of bumps in the road, and this is not a short-term thing. It's going to take a long time to really get to the a true, efficient, consolidated approach. I mean, like you said, you're going to find that you'll hear multiple agencies needing something very similar, but if you order the same exact thing for all three, it's not going to work quite right. So it's like, well, how do you solve for that problem? And so until all those agencies are on the same platform, and you can speak much better to ordering IT infrastructures, spending a lot of your career doing that than I can. But no one IT infrastructure, as far as I know, is created the same, no matter what rules were in place by, FedRAMP or whatever else that's out there. Still, there's something that's different between agencies that create this need for unique stuff. But we're different. I mean, how many times did you hear that argument, Chris?
Everyone always says they're different.
Yeah.
There are degrees. So GSA has a Google infrastructure. I recently left. I'm familiar with it. I went and signed up for my own, I'm talking to you right now through my own Google stuff. The Google that I buy is different than the Google the government buys. Like, it's hosted in different environments, got to be FedRAMP and, different security rules and all of that. If you're just trying to do a basic, like, two different agencies, well, some of them are in Teams, some of them are in Google Meet, some of them can't talk to each other. Like, there's just going to be weird, dumb logistics problems. Another thing that will have to shake itself out here in the budget, GSA, as part of the Federal Acquisition Service, has a large fund. It's called the Acquisition Services Fund. It is a really effective way for GSA to be a market maker. They can go out and buy all the cars and then charge the cars back to the individual agencies. So if you're consolidating in the 26 budget, is the money going to the agency or is the money going to GSA? And is it going to be conducted out of the Acquisition Services Fund, or is there a new fund? All of that is like inside government weird machinery, but it will impact whether or not you use one acquisition system that can take money from other places, or the internal acquisition system, which will then impact the agents, like the company who's bidding on this. Are you bidding on a GSA job or an OPM job? Are you getting invoice instructions from a GSA job or an OPM? Like just basic logistics. You're going to have to really keep your eyes on it to see how it's going to be conducted.
Exactly. You got to pay attention and be ready to do something what you're not used to doing before. I think that's absolutely right. And we're all sort of going to be learning this real time, and we'll get to the RFO stuff later. But that's what a lot of this is going to be all about. So let's go back up to the original point about the stuff that's consolidating. And I interrupted you before you got to talk about GWACs and how do you see them being impacted?
So by the time this airs, I'll probably be wrong.
That's fine.
Let's talk about why GWACs exist, and then how that likely leads to some future consolidation. So in the before times, before I joined GSA, the creation of GWACs, there were places that needed higher end technical talent. So there was some sort of thing, I think it was called the Mayflower Compact, where they signed where these four agencies were going to have the authority to go do their own, GWACs. I saw a picture of it. I think it's 94, probably wrong, but way back. So that's how NASA got SEWP. That's how NIH got specialty for 9-pack things. And GSA did a bunch of the larger ones that now are in the family of Alliant 2 or VETS or Polaris. So these were things where each agency had some, discrete scope area that they needed to go solve a problem. So at GSA for decades, I was a massive fan of the NASA SEWP program. The NASA SEWP program was incredibly fast. If I needed to get a product that was not necessarily on the SEWP vehicle, but somebody needed to add it, they did it in 24 hours. It was spectacular. I did not have that same experience with some of my own contracts And so, as a buyer, I would, get into trouble because I would choose to use NASA SEWP instead of using the GSA schedule. But it wasn't on it, so my buyer trumped it, and we were just going to go do it. The NASA SEWP program will have significant difficulty existing inside of GSA. The SEWP program has a limited number of awardees that are really focused on very fast turnaround. And you contrast that with the GSA schedule, which is a market maker for everything. It is a mile wide and SEWP is a mile deep. Inside of GSA, there is incredible pressure to focus on compliance. We have to make sure the provenance of every article is TAA compliant, it is BAA compliant, it is listed on the GSA Advantage or on the eLibrary as accurate. That level of detail forces you to be slower, contrasting with like only dealing with, I don't know how many awardees are on SEWP. So if this new plan, which is to, the GWACs are going to have the authority transferred to GSA, SEWP is going to have real extreme difficulty existing as it is inside of GSA. I hope it does. I hope they find a fast lane. I hope they keep the branding, the ducks. I hope Joanne continues to run it. Like it's everything that is right about doing things fast, but it's unlikely to continue the way it is if GSA is administering. Just nature.
So how do we pick that up? I mean, that has been the administration's preference. Like, buy fast, buy effectively, and don't waste money, don't pay too much. Like SEWP seems to have that model. Why is that not easily recreatable? And sounds like, is it just the culture, or is it truly the rules?
No, it's not the rules.
Okay.
It's the pressure.
Okay.
I was on the buyer side for IT for large services. So go back to like the Millennia contract, the Alliant contract. In the very first iteration of these contracts, we would say we need the best of the best. We need the highest quals. And there might be something like 10 or 12 awardees. And they had the same terms and conditions. We had a general understanding of how the bid and proposal process would work. And it was very fast. For very large services, hundreds of millions of dollars, you could do a solicitation and award it in about 4 months. It was spectacular. And back then there was no protest. So, but
good old
you
days.
go do the recompete. Company who didn't care about GSA in 2000 sees all this money going through, the Millennia or the Alliant contract, and they're like, we won on that. So your pool of awardees expands from 12 to the next round. It's got 60. The buyers are like, 60 is a lot. Like, I'm going to start dealing with more and more companies that aren't necessarily like the top of the top. And so you're going to get, just more churn in the solicitation. Like, you might get a protest at the solicitation that they don't have an improved accounting system, which before was not a big deal, but now is a big deal. And then when you do the next version of this contract, it moves from that to like what Oasis Plus is, where there's thousands, and it's pretty much a GSA schedule-like instrument where anybody is going to get on, assuming they meet all the quals. That's the inherent pressure in GSA because GSA is the market maker. So, philosophy, you don't have to pick one or the other. You can have a market maker and you can have a best of the best. Like Oasis Plus has an enterprise pool that has literally all the major companies that are like choosing to do high dollar work, but you've got to design for it. So like if SEWP is going to survive and adapt in GSA, it's going to have to be like a BPA-like instrument that has a limited number of awardees that GSA says, this is okay for fast and this is okay for everything. So we just have to reinforce to the powers that be that you need to design for both. You need to have the best of the best, and you also need to have everybody. And you can't make one or the other because you'll lose no matter what.
Right, and you're looking into requirements related to cost and pricing data. Like that's a huge holdup. On both sides of the agreement. So looking at all the rules, and what I'm hearing is, they need to change the scope, change certain terms. It's be like, look, in order to get to that speed of acquisition, we're going to have to take on more risk. Just like us as businesses, when we're trying to make a decision whether or not to serve one customer over the other, even though you've been my customer for 25 years, there's other customers willing to pay me a lot more to do something faster. Yeah, I'm going to work with that other customer, set it aside and make a risk-based decision that, that longtime customer is not going to be as happy because we're not going to serve them as fast. Well, then we'll see what happens. So it's sort of similar. You got to make that risk-based decision as to how do you want to make this buy and what happens if it breaks and what happens if it doesn't work as intended. Do you have the right clauses in there to make sure you're made whole, or do you have a way to say, all right, thanks for trying, next? So you terminate for default or find a way to terminate for convenience and then move on to next buyer, next service provider.
Let me get on my soapbox here for
Please.
a minute. I have many thoughts on the risk-based decision making and particularly the behavior of the contracting officer. I used to supervise several hundred of them. None of them, and when they were a child, drew a picture of a contracting officer for what they wanted to be when they grew up.
That's correct.
Their attention to detail people, that's in the personality of an 1102.
I agree.
But they absolutely are diehard patriots that want to save money for the taxpayer and want to do cool things. And the incentives in the system is to slowly beat all the innovation and all of the risk taking out of them. Because if you are assigned you're assigned a contract action and you want to do something innovative and new, you have to have top level cover. You got to have like some, political appointee or somebody who wants to do something disruptive that says, I want you to take risks. You have to then, if you're using regular processes, it's fine. To use innovative authorities, you got to get permission. If you're going to do it as an other transaction or a CSO or, you got to everyone's watching you. You will then get audited. Your file must be stellar and your documents will get reviewed by 7 people above you where happy to glad and I don't know. And then you ultimately make a decision and it gets done. Then if it doesn't work, obviously, the risk wasn't worth it. The person doesn't get any money. They'll get a bonus if they took a risk. They get killed if they don't have a complete file. And, there's no incentive in the system. There's just so much oversight that it does take all of the creativity out of most folks. So I've railed for a decade about the negative impact of protests on the time scale for doing acquisition. There's also this internal risk avoidance thing where, if we do something wrong, I was involved in something that, and ended up into a congressional hearing and my CIO got killed, absolutely killed because we took a risk on something that we thought was innovative they didn't like. So the next time, all right, no more innovative. The system, no matter how much you change the FAR, if you don't change the incentives for the contracting officer, nothing will change. You absolutely need to change the operating environment as much as you got to change the rules.
Beautiful. Yeah, I remember when we would acquire within the agency I used to work with, we'd map out the timeline of requirements to being on contract. And yeah, we would still map in that several month period. Here's the potential protest period. Let's just include it. So, when we end up delivering, we can tell our customers this is when realistically when this is going to happen. And then if it happens not to be protested, great. We under promised, over delivered. Great. And everyone's going to be happy in that situation. But that's terrible to essentially say, oh, we got to count on that protest. The incumbent wants to get that bridge contract to tide things over or whatever the reason may be for that protest. It's terrible that you got to think about that as part of your PALT. That doesn't seem right. So to your point, changing the incentives, I love that. I mean, I've seen arguments all over the place that, maybe the FAR just should be use your best business sense in acquiring the goods or services that your agency needs. And we all know that reason why the FAR is as thick as it is currently is because of lots of mistakes, missteps, inappropriate things that happens, whatever it may be. So they just piled on a new rule, another new rule, and here we are, when it was first done, back in the 80s, maybe it wasn't as thick, but here we are, lessons learned. Now we're this crazy document that no one knows how to navigate. So how do we mix properly incentivizing contracting officers with how these new rules are going to be written? And then we'll transition into the RFO.
The RFO stuff, we'll get into the rewrites of like Part 33. I think the number one thing that drives risk avoidance for a contracting officer is the likelihood of a protest, which then forces additional administrative documentation and a lack of transparency. If a CO says something, then that's used back. Like if you, for some reason, if you conduct discussions and then you've got to raise everybody up, then every protest is you should have rated me higher, my price was lower, I should have won. And then the CO says, well, no, my safest answer here is to not talk to anybody, which is the dumbest thing in the world. Like if I'm going out and buying a car, I'm going to 4 dealerships, I'm talking to 4 people. I'm not telling them I went to the other one. So the change of procedural things for discussions is really important. And then corresponding cost for the protest, for the revenue protest. If the incumbent, so I watch football, big Eagles fan. The coaches have 2 challenges. And then if they win, they might get another one. Companies should have the same. You can file X number of protests. And if you lose them, you don't get another one. If you keep winning, then you're right. Then sure, you can keep going. Or there's a cost associated, like if you were gaining $100 million worth of revenue, and that, all of the profit associated with revenue now goes to American flags for babies in every hospital. Like something that no one can argue against, but it lessens the likelihood of, the K Street law firm just saying, hey, here you go. We're gonna stop this up for 120 days, because the threat of that makes the documentation on these awards 70 pages, and it should be 10.
Yeah, no, that's all we talked about in our prep meetings, right before the proposals are coming in, and how are we going to document? What do we need to do to make sure we avoid the protest? It was like you would think you were calling for Voldemort, right? So yeah, been through that pain. I remember living through it, and it was big time in avoidance. And so what I'm hearing is, you might be in favor of the loser pays provision that's been floating out there for a number of years.
I have been arguing for it forever.
Yeah.
I used to run an acquisition shop, and because it was fee for service, time was money. So if it takes 8 months versus 4 months, and then I could have done 2 jobs instead of 1. So I really cared about efficiency, and it kept making the time longer. So on major procurements, the revenue incentive exceeds the relationship value that they have with agencies.
Yeah, I know. I tell a lot of people when I advise them, it's like, do you really want to protest this? Because remember, there are people behind these protests and not machines. They'll remember you protested this one big award. So if there's something else you're chasing in that agency that's close to this, don't think they won't remember that. And don't think they don't know how to properly paper some certain weaknesses of yours, even though it's not totally there, but they'll find a way to document it and relate it to the RFP at hand. And you happen not to win that one. You're going to protest again. So you got to remember that people are behind every single acquisition right now. And I think it's going to be for a very, very long time, no matter how much assistance they get from technology, until we see a procurement authority official is a computer. There's always going to be someone behind it. All right, so let's go. Sorry, go ahead.
This is just fun. In the history of my entire federal acquisition career, a company that has protested has never won the resulting corrective action on anything I've ever done.
Wow.
And that completely reinforces your point. It's almost like, after you've broken up with your ex is saying, are you sure? I'm pretty sure. We were sure the first time, but now the more that you're pressing on me, I'm really sure now.
That's very interesting. Yeah, because what'll happen is that GAO report will come out every year saying, yep, 40 whatever % of protests, ended up in action. because it resulted in some kind of agency action, it doesn't mean that the agency action helped the protester end up winning the protest. I don't know how many studies have been done along those lines, but to your personal experience, that number is probably a very low percentage. So that's very interesting that you give that perspective that, like, look, yeah, you may get an action, you may extend the time, you may cause some consternation by the companies you're competing against, but ultimately you're just pissing off the customer. You're likely still not going to win. Those sour grapes just are not going to work out. You may be right that they forgot to cross a T on that one strength, and because of that one strength, the source selection authority would have made a different decision. Great, fine. Thanks for putting us through that pain. You don't think I'm going to remember that? All right. All right, let's not harp too much on this protest. Let's talk about RFO, the revolutionary FAR overhaul. When we're recording this, it's just beginning. We've only seen 2 parts and the related class deviations. How do you see this progressing? How is this going to work right?
So there have been 2 released as the time that we're recording this. Part 1, Part 34. The the line out versions are all on acquisition.gov. Anybody can go out there. I was fascinated that in major system acquisition that EVM remained. It exists on large military programs. It should continue to exist as a possible methodology for major system acquisitions. It actually has no regulatory basis. It's not in the underlying public law. An interesting factoid, though, if you use some sort of LLM to go see whether or not it is regulatory, some of these, like ChatGPT, will say that EVM is regulatory. It isn't. So there's like, you would have to cut these things down by cutting out lines. And most of what they're cutting out are superlatives. The acquisition system should do X. It should be best value. It's now from 18 pages to 4 for part 34. And then for part 1, it clearly says, like, just be efficient. I'm really interested in a couple of sections. So what happens to part 19? What happens to parts, 12, 15, and 16, part 8, part 33? Like, they're not out yet. But if they're cut down at the scale of what we've seen out of 1 and 34, it should give much more broader discretion to a contracting officer. So net positive that there's less things that you've got to worry about absolute compliance. All of the good stuff that's being cut out probably ends up in a buying guide. It ends up in something as here's what as an agency we want to go do, but won't have the same weight of regulation and can be changed faster. So this appears to be, so far, a really effective way of changing regulation, so that it really allows you to then change your behavior. Likely outcome, though, will be that agencies will become less standardized. So the FAR got as thick as it was to make everybody do everything the same. And if you're really skinning it down and moving things into buying guides, you will have more idiosyncrasy at agencies for their own unique requirements, which will make it a little less effective for industry. Like right now, a Part 8 buy is this way, and everybody's got to use numbers instead of letters. And you can, like your LSJs instead of JNAs. Like everyone knows you got to follow it this way.
Right.
It will get harder. And if other instruments start to become more popularized, so like commercial solutions openings or other transactions, like the other ways of buying versus regular FAR-based procurement. So it will probably mean you have to be more of an expert at how things are being done and then where they're going to be posted and how you interact with them. So like the front door will end up becoming multiple front doors for where like you could find RFPs at.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to move away from the SAM.gov approach, but to your point, we're going to write these RFPs based off of policy instead of FAR, I guess is what you're saying, or about, buying guides. So, but still, the culture for so many years that's been ingrained is what rules do I need to follow so I can get the boxes checked to make sure the council is okay with me issuing this RFP. I mean, it seems like it's got to be more. I mean, it's one thing to change the regulation. It's another thing to change the culture and the training and the behaviors. So what I'm supposing is that no matter what you change the regulation, it's still going to take a really long time to change how these contracting officers like buy goods and services. Simple as that.
So there is the possibility, by no means am I like an artificial intelligence expert, there is a possibility that the use of AI tools will make this better.
Okay.
So the possibility of doing requirements definition. Before AI, I would have to have somebody really smart engineer describing what it is that they want and a technical writer improving it. Every LLM today is better than my best expert for like creating a section C for what requirements are. So that should make it faster. Yep. Every agency will probably have tools to start doing, like, we have a template, we have a buying guide, compare document A to document B. So instead of it being a review panel of your peers, it's did you pass the check on are we compliant? So like there's definitely tools that will make it faster, whether or not there are hallucinations in it, and you still need to have a brain on top of it to make sure that you're following, you're doing it the right way. But possibility for systems should make the throughput at least where it was a couple of years ago with fewer people. Like there are absolutely fewer people pushing these things through. One of the questions we talked about before in the pre-chat was like business developers right now chasing these things. Who should they be talking to, and what should be like? Are you pursuing a GSA buy, or is it still going to be at the agency? My absolute advice for everybody right now is try and get your contract extended. There's never been a better window for saying, unexpected events, urgent and compelling, like getting another 6 months or another year is in the interest of the acquisition shop and your company. So if you're currently an incumbent on something, buying time while the government figures out the return to office mandates, which systems they're going to use, how many people are assigned to project A versus project B. Like, we don't even have a CO for that anymore. So like, can we just buy more time? So the number one sell right now is, can you give me an extension? Then
yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Can I figure out where should I go do like influence the next procurement?
Yeah, especially if your contract's being transferred over to GSA. It's like, you know what? I can't figure out what system your contract is, but like, let me just get a modification out to extend this while we figure this all out. I mean, that's really intriguing. I mean, I remember the days, I was in the Intel community, so stuff was still hard copy. So I'd open the 4 binder for whatever it is, the 4 folder binders, and you're looking through contract. It's old school that way. But I mean, no, now it's in theory electronic. Some are PDF, some are Word, or who knows what. And then, how you track those exact contracts. So all I'm hearing is you got to be really proactive. If you're the customer now, following around who owns your contract, keep asking those questions. Keep asking your PM, hey, who are you working with at GSA to make sure that these bills are getting paid and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to follow the people that go around with these contracts. And so be proactive. So that's I think part of what you're getting at, Chris, too. It's not only ask for more time, but be proactive and figure out what's next.
I would say the secondary thing, if you can get in front of a customer, which is hard right now, if you actually can get an audience, you already the work is awarded and you have a reason to talk to somebody in your government core or your CO, there's going to be fewer of them. The incentive for them will be the next time to make the job probably bigger and probably more commercial. So just simple, think of like the acquisition system as a system. If you have 1,000 people, you can do 1,000 awards. If you have 500 people, you can do 500 awards. So those 500 awards still have to spend that $1 trillion for DoD. So that means the number, like, money still has to flow, even if we're trying to save money in other places. The consolidated requirements are likely to be a path to manage a limited number of workforce. So if you have a current award and you've got to interface with another company because it's related, and you've got to buy products from another company because they're a part of the delivery, say like, hey, can we just do all of this together as a managed service? Like, hey, it will save everybody's time and money. We won't have to bid 3 different jobs. We can make it one. We're all going to be on a team. We can do it fixed price. Like that will be music to the ear of like, you know what? If I could do 1 buy instead of 3, that's in everyone's interest. So like any influence in shaping to making this thing outcome oriented is probably in the company's interest.
Love that. I mean, now that we're returned to office, like use your badge to find the person with the cat card, get in there and go find these folks and talk to them. That like, look, we've all talked, like we can make this easier on you. You can do it. You don't think an acquisition official wouldn't want to listen to someone saying, what can you do to make this easy for me? What? Of course they're going to want that because their staff has just been trimmed from 20 to 2. So I love that. So along those points, I mean, the FAR has always prioritized commercial buys. The Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act from, over 20 years ago, further emphasized that. Like, what went wrong? Like, why aren't we buying commercially as much? And now we're making it act like we haven't been. We got to buy everything off the shelf. We got to buy from the OEMs. You brought that up. Like, what went wrong and what do we need to fix? What are we missing here that wasn't going right?
So there's commercial and then there's government commercial.
Please explain.
So like, I would love to be able to buy any laptop, any camera, any software, like for, to be able to roll something out in the government. I talked to a number of these companies, and I'm sure it's the same thing you've had too. One of the first questions is, all right, so we want to settle with the federal government. Do you have FedRAMP? Do you know what Section 889 is? Do you have a bite dance clause in it? Like, there's commercial, and then there's the, hey, can you also like tweak it a little bit for us so that, we comply with a law that Congress passed, something in a National Defense Authorization Act somewhere, and then you can prove the provenance of the supply chain. That is not commercial practice. It isn't. So we're forcing the commercial market to bend to government requirements, and then we're yelling at the acquisition workforce saying, why aren't you buying it commercially? I'm like, well, because the commercial companies don't want to sell it to us that way, so they got to use some sort of aggregator reseller kind of model so they can stay in compliance with us, and then we got to pay to make the changes so that it's commercial, but it's like working inside of like GSA or FDA or NASA or wherever else. Everybody wants the same outcome, but we have so many administrative steps to get there that you have to really focus on like FedRAMP for everybody and government pays for it. Like we have a hosted environment, you can put it in there and anybody wants to plug in, great. Because otherwise you're never going to get a small business who wants to do tech work with the government, but also sell commercially because it costs too much to get FedRAMP for them. They'll just go make more money commercially. So it's just finding the way, which GSA did a lot of, to make FedRAMP an easy door to get through. Make SAM.gov's absolutely got to be easier than what it is right now. Like there's got to be a way for you to like put all your information in one system and then connect it to the cloud, and then all right, now you're in our network. Like that. Those are the things that would allow us to actually buy commercial.
Yeah. Synchronized eBuy, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely.
Well, like even eBuy. I don't even know why eBuy exists. Like there should be one singular portal, and eBuy is one, and Advantage is another, and GSA was working on buy.gov, but there's also the SEWP portal and whatever. Like find somebody that just has the basic posting software, and everything is there.
Yeah, in theory, and I think, but when we haven't said this word yet, Doge has come in, they all saw this. They see this. In theory, it should be really easy. And, the companies that, they came from on the commercial side were super small, low revenue at the time, so it's really easy to make these huge wholesale changes. Here's the U.S. government that spends trillions of dollars and for how many different missions and how many different states and countries and all that, you can't just easily just say, all right, we'll just redirect traffic this way and set up this system that way. It's just not that easy. I mean, obviously, we all wish we had thought in, way back in, the late 19th century into the 20th century, when we set up all these new agencies, we should set up with common infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. Like, I guess they tried. Never happened.
I mean, a lot of this is Congress's fault. I love to trash Congress. The appropriations go to agencies.
Yeah.
That gives the agencies the power. They can say that they're unique. The new administration's goal on whether or not it's DOGE or just efficiency, consolidation, makes total logical, rational sense. Anybody
Absolutely.
running any business anywhere would do the same thing.
I agree.
We're gonna have one email system, one hosting system, one phone, one card, but you're paying taxpayer dollars. And what if you're company number 2? That's where the drama comes. Yep. So we've got to be okay with we're picking a winner, or we've in the early times Microsoft versus WordPerfect. We decided that you would one got one, the other got the other. So we're keeping the market going. We're choosing to be inefficient. We're picking the top 4, but we're okay with only being the top 4. That's where we have to be to make sure that we're efficient, but we're also not killing a market by picking a number 1 favorite. We're not going to make everybody in the government drive Pontiacs. That doesn't exist anymore. But
I know you mean. Yes, we're all going to drive the Aztec. I love it. So what should be members of the industrial community be doing to help participate in RFO and making sure that this works? I mean, besides, obviously not complain is probably the top of the list, but how can they be proactive in making it work?
So there are public comment periods. So everything is going to be, posted out there on acquisition.gov and a bunch of websites where they are asking for feedback. We'd love to have feedback before the line out, but you're not going to get access to I don't like this one section. This is being done inside of government with acquisition professionals. We're not going to influence whether or not we change happy to glad on line 17A. You're going to get the output. Yeah. Then it's going to be having very public dialogue about the implications of the change. So like I said, Part 19, Part 33, what's going to happen with socioeconomic programs? Most of them are regulatory. So are you going to be changing the regulatory basis for them, or they stay? And then are you going to enforce them? Those are small business goals are based on percentages in the agency. Are you going to enforce those goals? And they were in my performance plan, as a SES. Yep. So internally, I would tell everybody, we're going to make our small business goal because that's part of my performance plan. If that goes away, then my incentive for doing the small business set-asides lessens. So when they changed 19, small businesses have a very active, vested interest in saying, this is what this will do to my business. Talk to your congressman, posting on LinkedIn, establishing, in trade associations, the time to act is going to be the late summer as they issue these things, and there's a public comment period, because wholesale changes to an entire socioeconomic category could decimate a whole category of businesses if it isn't loud at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. You trashed them before, but the only ones that really could make real change is Congress. If you want a certain socioeconomic category to be protected, it's probably going to require a law and not, an SBA policy or preference. And I know a lot of the large businesses, they have small business plans. I mean, gosh, for years, who monitored those in the first place? So, you all would get the SBA scorecard. So at least you got a public, clap or shaming, Homeland Security got a C in small business participation on its contracts. Okay, now what? So either it has teeth and has implications, or is it just, a showcase of what's going to go on? So, what does that really mean to taxpayers? What does it really mean to the policymakers, to have that small business participation in certain socioeconomic categories? So, before I let you go, we need to talk more about AAS office and what its role is today. You essentially seemed like someone who really worked for DOD, not from so much for GSA. I'd love to just get some inside view about what the AAS office does, and is it going to really change under what we see in the new executive order we were just talking about?
So I worked there forever. I'm obviously biased. Some of my best friends in life and some of the most incredibly talented people who, make significantly less money as govies than they could on the outside, have done, like the largest, most complicated projects in government. The St. Elizabeth campus, the construction project for, GSA, my old office, did all of the network infrastructure for them. So there was a massive protest in 2009. There were major companies fighting over it. Well, my office took it over. We did it in 7 months and was awarded with no protest and saved a ton of money. And it's the kind of thing that you don't know that GSA does. There's the possibility of working on a new construction project with technology. But I hired a bunch of people that came from the Pentagon renovation and they loved it. And then, then I would redeploy them to other parts, like doing, new development for, drones or ISR projects for the military. It has been the most transparent, the most consistent large federal acquisition service provider anywhere in government. It was known for not losing protests. They had a 99% protest win rate. The wave of deferred resignation plus some of the probationary employees, the personnel cuts, everyone in government's getting hit, and they're included. They're going to see significant personnel cuts, which will then force them to really focus. They will have to skinny up on which customers are supporting, which kind of projects they're going to do. So it probably means less nice to have projects. Every office had a couple of really big, really cool projects, and then you got to go do this favor. The fewer people you have, the fewer favors you have, and you will focus on the ones where you have resources that have that subject matter expertise. So they've survived, the first 2-3 months of the new administration. They are well regarded inside of GSA. They're really going to be independent of what's happening with the executive orders. It's not going to be part of the consolidated GSA spending part. That's a different name. It's something called OCAS. So the assisted acquisition is separate from the internal procurement side. So people might get pulled into it, a former AS person's running the new consolidated things. It makes sense. So they'll be fine. They'll just be smaller. And give them a couple of years, the numbers will be back to where it was before. So I have great faith in AS in the future, and I didn't want to go. I miss it. I still say we versus them, but go to their website, give them business. They'd love to do work for you.
Yeah. So, that's exactly where I was going to go. Is AAS somewhere that industry should be directly, marketing towards, or is it more, let me talk with this agency. Hey, have you worked with AAS to help you streamline getting this service? Or is it a mix of both?
No one anywhere in government is going to immediately saying, yes, I'm open for business. I'd like to do more. Right now, it's just all hands on deck. Can we stay alive? But this is the place that does consolidated work. So I talked about some of the boring stuff about where money flows. They're one of the only places, if you've all gone out to dinner and everyone's trying to pay the bill. And so everyone gets out their credit card, but one person doesn't want to pay the bill for everybody. This is that place. This is the place that has the fund that can take, you take one of these federated agencies like DHS, tons of components. Headquarters doesn't want to carry customs money. Customs money doesn't want to carry ICE's money. GSA is built to take everybody's money and then pay the bills. So anything that is in a federated, multi-tenant, complicated thing where everyone's got to pass the hat is the most logical place for a consolidated requirement.
Well, there you go, folks. You're in business development and you want to serve multiple segments within an agency, divisions within an agency. there's your solution. Push towards it, shape the RFPs and push on it. Having that discussion is really, really important. All right. So Chris, you're now in the private sector. What are you doing? Like, what's your plan? What's the business plan besides taking over the world, like Pinky and the Brain? But
same thing we do every day, Jeff.
Yes, there you go. So obviously, besides having this insider knowledge, where do you see yourself delivering value for your clients?
So the initial answer is unsatisfying. I have massive post-employment restrictions as like a former Govy that did acquisition. So I have limitations initially where, like, in my cooling off period, I can advise companies behind the scenes. I mean, zero representation back to the government, but I can generally say, here's what's going on in GSA, and you want some strategy. You want to talk about where you could possibly grow or respond to the shifts that are happening in RFO. So ordinary consulting. I am starting to build a capture practice that's pursuing named opportunities. There's a lot of talent that just left government. Anybody who's out there who's looking for that market, independent of like talking to me and my company, like there are smart people that are out there on LinkedIn, open to work for who will really help you go capture work. So I'm going to start doing that. And then the third thing is kind of fun, working with small businesses. I used to do a lot of SBIR work. So SBIR phase 3s, startup companies that are trying to sell directly to the government, working with them on like, hey, there's an RFI for this, or there's a CSO for that. And they don't know what sam.gov is. They don't know like basic how to go interact with GSA. So me and a couple of people, we will help them get through the wickets for like, should you pay attention to this? Is this an opportunity? Or like, you want to form a contract with the government? Here's what they mean. Like we can translate government speak into business speak for somebody who's never even considered it.
Yeah, I love it. Look, there's a ton of money out there, no matter what you're hearing out in the press. The government needs to get stuff done. We need to protect our warfighters. We need to improve services to taxpayers. We need to keep our veterans healthy. I mean, you name it, the federal government is still doing it. It's just going to be different in how it's going to be done. And hopefully SBIR gets a permanent renewal, by the way. It's a great program to try something totally new that you'd be afraid to do with just your own dollars. You get this essentially free seed money to try out an idea to commercialize. It's a great way to, try that new encryption method, that great new service that no one has ever thought about. Whatever it is, look for those topics issued by lots of different agencies and see if that's something that your company could take a shot at. And, in many cases, especially the phase 1s, are pretty much risk-free. But by the time you get to that phase 3 is where the real money could really amp up. I mean, do you see any, since you brought it up, I won't let you go then quite yet, do you see that kind of direct award process going away? That's become like a really dirty phrase.
No, I think the SBIR mill stuff was overblown. The SBIR program is exactly what like America needs for disrupting itself. So the majority of like the really cool innovations that like people know about came out of direct funding from the government. Like the internet we're talking right now, the Roomba came from a SBIR. So when I'm allowed to later, I will be actively involved in submitting responses back to SBIR solicitations, because the ability to have your own proprietary, your own intellectual property, your own solution, and have a non-competitive, directed, authorized sole source for 20 years is the most incredible gift a company can have. So that is an absolute business area that everyone should be paying attention to. I do think it gets reauthorized. And then the onus is on the company. Go sell. Go convince somebody that your technology is worth giving a shot.
Yeah, I love that. No, we could do a whole separate hour on that alone, Chris. I love that program. It's got a great future ahead of it. I really hope it's permanently reauthorized, not just reauthorized, but permanently reauthorized, so we don't have to keep worrying every year about whether or not it's going to continue going. Hey, listen, Chris, this has been really awesome. We talked a lot about, with all the changes here with these executive orders, that contracting officers, the incentives need to change. The rules may change, but they need to be incentivized to take that risk. Make a mistake, fail fast, and then adjust appropriately. better discretion, broader discretion, and, just understand that there are fewer acquisition officers. What can you do if you're in the supplier category? What can you do to make the contracting officer's job easier? Any other takeaways you want to make sure people heard during our talk here, Chris?
Just that tonight, well, this will be played later, but go Birds.
You already won a Super Bowl. That's not enough. Just one.
We won 2 Super Bowls.
Sorry, last year's Super Bowl. I should say it that way. I apologize. I can't forget about 1980. Am I remembering the year? No, 1980 was the unfortunate. It was Nick Foles. I can't remember the year now. Anyways, well, it was great talking to you, Chris. This has been really a treat for us. Anyone, please connect with Chris on LinkedIn. And he's now on the open, so go get some quick advice from him. Go pick his brain. He's going to be out and about talking about it at different conferences and industry associations, I'm sure. Let us know what you think of this episode. Give us some feedback. But like Chris said, as those new rules come out, the new FAR comes out, you got to say something. You can't complain about what the new rules are if you didn't say anything. If they don't end up reacting on it, at least you tried. Anyhow, give us some feedback. Tell your friends about us. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really fun.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks all. Thanks for listening.